what do you know about the low barrier shelter and that system, and what the city's trying to do? Do you think there's things that are working, or are there things that they could do better?
That's a bandage situation right now.
Mm-hmm.
The low barrier shelter is a bandage situation.
Bandage, yeah.
For the size of a crisis that national homelessness is, the small bandage fixes of low barrier shelters or shelters that's all it is. It's a bandage. It's not a permanent solution, right? People need a permanent solution. And now the demographic of homeless people is not the same as it was when I was homeless, okay? I was homeless because who's going to rent to a drug addict that's got no money, right? Now, there are a lot of people who are ordinary, normal people. They might be low income, and they get put into these situations where, case in point, I have family members right now that are experiencing hidden homelessness, okay, where through no fault of their own, they were paying their rent on time, like good tenants, had always been good tenants, and then the landlord sold the building, and the new landlord wanted to do renovations, so they got evicted. And even though there's a promise to return, you get the right of refusal, first right of refusal on return, right? After 4 months of, okay, well, this should only take 3 or 4 months to do the renovations and you can move right back in. Okay, they can go and their child can go and stay at family members for a few months, right? But after that few months, then they get contacted and say, oh, there was problems with the renovations can't go forward. You won't be able to move back in.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're left.
Reno evicted. Yeah,
Reno evicted.
Yeah.
Okay. But they're also left with, now they're disabled as well, and they have a child.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They don't receive enough from disability to pay rent anywhere.
Yeah. All the support systems aren't geared to the current economic markets.
Right. So
what do you think a permanent solution would be?
So then what? They put their name in for government subsidized housing and go on to a wait list. And that's been a year and a half now. That they're still essentially homeless. Everything they own is in bins. And they're living at family members, sleeping on the couch. And that's not right. You know, a country is a society, a community is judged by how they take care of the less fortunate, how they take care of the vulnerable members of their society, of their community. And we're failing, horribly failing.
With the deficit of subsidized supported housing?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So
there
you feel
are ways,
that's the key to the solution.
Yes. I think there would be some ways that the government could help by allowing, say, other landlords to register as geared to income rental units, where it's not just the government housing, but actual private landlords for market value apartments, right? If they were able to, never mind the geared to income subsidy for the property, it should be a guaranteed subsidy for the individual, right? And I believe that disability should be tied into the rate of inflation, right? What people were receiving in the 90s on disability, or the early 2000s even on disability, is the same thing that they're receiving now, even though our dollar's worth, a lot less.
What percentage of the people that are facing housing challenges would be disability oriented, do you think?
A good number.
Yeah.
A large percentage.
So just like for one segment of it is for the people that are receiving benefits because of disability, which is, I know there's hoops to go through and it's pretty well certified. It's not as easy as people think
No, absolutely not.
to get on that. And so that's one way of helping a big chunk of the problem is people facing these challenges is disability supports don't keep up with market rate.
Well, absolutely. And they don't keep up with inflation, which means that they don't keep up with food prices.
Mm-hmm.
They don't keep up with anything. Okay, so then you get desperation playing in. Okay. And desperation will lead good people to do crime, to do things, to feed themselves, to feed whatever. And that desperation leads to this whole perpetuating cycle of trauma, of shame, of self-loathing, right?
Yeah, you're in the toilet bowl once you start going around and around that, right?
Right.
You're just going to go down. Yeah.
So then how do you get out?
Yeah.
Right?
You need stabilization.
You have to have a stable environment.
Yeah.
What saved my life? Well, getting sick and getting that stable environment.
I think that's the theory behind the low barrier shelter is to get people into a situation that's a little bit less destabilized. And
but
then
it's
have a
not.
No, I don't.
It's not, though. You get a place to stay for the night.
Yeah.
You get a bed to lay down on.
But the next phase of what they have there is if for the people that they feel like who want to try to move on up, I think there's a second phase to that. You're right. Low barrier is just shelter. Get out in the morning.
Sure, there is. Okay.
But I think they're trying to use that as part of a system.
Okay. If it's used as a stepping stone into recovery programs, great. Okay. But again, one system is not supporting the other. Okay.
Yeah.
What are the wait times to get into any sort of recovery program?
Yeah, that's the other part of the problem, right?
So you have these people who are stuck in this perpetual cycle who, even if they want out, they don't know how to get out. If they knew how to get out, they would get out.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to be a drug addict. Nobody wants to be a criminal. They are left feeling at that particular moment that is their only. We don't choose to make bad decisions. We make bad decisions because at that time we thought it was a good decision. We thought this was the only decision we could make.
Well, supports for mental health and for those who've been traumatized and whatnot are key, right?
Right.
Because they're not going to be able to do anything until they have that dealt with, right?
Absolutely. They're not going to be able to deal with one problem until they deal with the other. And the very first problem they have to deal with is stability, is homelessness, is having a permanent place. Okay. There's a pride of of residency. Okay. Uh, even for poor people, even for homeless people, even for drug addicts, even for mentally ill people, it's still their house. It's their room. It's their private place where they can feel however they want to feel, right? And in these shelters, you don't have that privacy. You don't have that level of stability. And it takes that level of stability to even start to even contemplate how to overcome any of these other problems, right?
Well, if housing is out of reach for two working people who have no disabilities and are able to have options, then
Right.
that's a huge chasm for somebody that has to rebuild themselves, their lives, and just start over again, right?
Right,
So
absolutely.
if
So
yeah,
if they end up with there are barriers to reclaiming your life when you get into those situations, because if you end up with a criminal record,
mm-hmm.
well,
Yep.
who's going to want to hire you, right? You'll never get a police check again, so nobody's going to hire you, right? And that perpetuates the situation.
Yeah, there's more
Uh,
hurdles. There's
there,
lots of hurdles in the way of people when they get to that point, right?
right, and it becomes an insurmountable, right?
So that's why we need better upstream stuff, so that people that are traumatized they have that support even in their teens,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
It's just so that they don't get to the point where it's irreversible or
Right.
more harder
Now,
or harder.
public acceptance about mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
public acceptance about trauma, uh, and the things that cause childhood traumas, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's drinking, whether it's drugs, whether it's abusive situations of every stripe,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, public acceptance of a conversation around those things, okay? If we can have conversations, actual conversations like you and I sitting here right now, I can tell you all about doing drugs. I can tell you all about crime. I can tell you all those kind of horror stories, right? And you'll sit there with an open mind and listen to it and go, that's very interesting. And you'll have your own contemplations, right? And we can have a conversation, right? But for a long time, and it's really just in the last, say, decade, that we've been able to openly have those conversations. Until then, everything was privated. Everything was secreted away. We were told as young men to stifle it,
Mm-hmm.
to suppress all of that, to not talk about it, to suck it up, right? And that's not the right view, right?
We've covered some interesting ground. We don't have much more time.
Okay.
And I think we'll end up having another conversation. Let's just continue it down the road.
Yeah, I love talking, so.
Yeah, no, this is good because, when we reveal some of the challenges, we also reveal some of the solutions, and
Absolutely.
we begin to realize it's very nuanced, and there's a lot of different parts and pieces to it. But there, you got to support people before they get too far down the rung, and they got to help people up the rung
Absolutely.
in phased ways, right?
If I'd had a social worker who cared when I was younger, that I felt I could have an open conversation with, I guarantee the trajectory of my life would have been vastly different. Vastly different, right? For example, I have a grade 9 formal education. I got my GED when I was in jail, right? I took a personal support worker course to help look after my aunt and uncle, but that was years later. Uh, and yet, I'm an articulate person. I have a mind. I have thoughts. I have feelings. But if you seen me in the 90s, you wouldn't have given me the time of day. But somebody did. And because they did, here I am now. Right? If that intervention had happened earlier in my life, what trajectory would have it? Right?
For sure.
So these open conversations, right? The ability to have open conversations and the encouragement of having people have compassion and compassion towards their community. These are all the fundamentals of healing our community and the people in it.
That's an excellent note to end this session on.
Okay.
I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk.
Yeah, thank you.